Hello and welcome to another video. Jackson here. And today I want to talk about the Hara, which is ultimately a locus of perception. And some traditions see it as kind of an energy center, right? So the Hara is the lower gut. That's what it is. And different traditions have different names for it. The Taoism tradition calls it the Tian. Rinzai Zen calls it the Tanden. Tantric yoga and various yogic traditions sometimes refer to it as like the Brahma Granthi, or, you know, there's different terms for it. Sometimes it's called, I've heard it called Red Bindu. I've heard it called Lower Khanda. You know, there's different names for this. But why do we need this? What is it and why is it important for meditation practice? The Hara is important because it's it's one of the points of grounding energetically. Okay, when we start to awaken, usually a tremendous amount of energy is released. Sometimes we call this Kundalini awakening, sometimes we call it different things, but ultimately when awareness starts becoming more aware of itself through the body, what happens is that the universe has two fundamental polarities, right? The substratum of consciousness and that which animates it, which is inseparable from it, which is sometimes called energy. You know, some different traditions have different names for it, but, you know, like there's Shiva versus Shakti. But there's different names for this stuff, like in different metaphysical systems ultimately. But when one becomes aware of itself, it kind of invokes the other, and that's why we get energetic awakening. Now what can happen is our body can become overwhelmed by energy, right? And anywhere through the body where there's unconscious material, there can be stagnations, there can be blockages that can impede the flow of energy. And that energy, like I said, is inseparable from consciousness. So it's wherever if there's a blockage, that's where your attention's going to be, is your awareness is going to be on that blockage, right? Why does the Hara matter? Well, because when energy first arises, it has a tendency to move upward very strongly. And it's good to have grounding in our system, in our energetic system, so that, you know, we don't get totally cooked. We don't get our circuits totally blown, right? And sometimes even if there's no blocks, you can still get energy overload. You can still get, you know, our system can get too, those of you familiar with Chinese medicine, you know, it would be said that we get too yang or too hot energetically, and you can start getting energy in the head building up, pressure building up in the head or in the heart. You can get burning, you can get really intense physical overload, somatic symptoms that can start arising from this, actually, if the body is not clear. Or even if it is clear, it can still be overwhelming to our body, and it can take time to acclimatize to it. And part of the fundamentals of good spiritual practice is having a way of grounding. Okay? So part of this is building these lower energy centers, right? The Dantian in Taoism, the Hara. And ultimately, it's also a locus of perception. So eventually that energy center can become active, but when deeper awakening, more profound levels of awakening happen that are more somatic, not just energetic, but also when the awareness kind of comes into the body, not just from a head level where it's very empty and spacious and sky-like, not just from a heart level where it's very, like a lot of oneness going on, but at a deeper level, when that falls away, that's a much greater death. That is the death of the separate self ultimately, and with it, the experience of division, really. And so we start to become free right to the level of the body, right down to the unconscious stuff held in the body. So training that energy center early on not only helps us with energetic grounding, but it's like a seed that is planted for later deeper enlightenment to occur and awakening to occur. How do you go about training that? So how do we train the Hara? First of all, it's about becoming aware of it. Okay. This energy center can hold a lot of energy, and so it's a very good area to ground without losing energy and keeping the body functioning in a really good way. So building the Hara. So there's a few approaches that are usually important to this. Part of it is meditation posture, having a good posture, a straight spine in meditation. And using a mudra like this, the dhyana mudra, and not forcefully pushing your hands together, but just firm, right? And just below the belly button, holding it there, okay? And bringing attention not in a forceful way, but a few inches below the belly button, below the navel, but not on the surface. It's almost like you have to go deep inside, like a few inches at least, probably 3 or 4 inches inside. And so you can kind of do this using a crosshairs type thing, where it's like, if you could have a vertical line going from below the belly button to the spine, and then another line from the perineum going upwards, where those two lines intersect, that is like the crosshairs of where this Hara is. And so first you have to locate it. And that can be, for some people, very easy. For some people, it's pretty tricky. So all you're going to do is you're just going to sit, and you're going to go into kind of a stillness, right? Very gentle, you're just present. And you bring your awareness to that spot. You can move it back and forth on that line from below the belly button to the spine, or you can move it up and down from the perineum up to where the other line where it intersects with the other line inside, if you were to visualize lines, right? But this isn't a visualization practice. I want to be really clear about that. It's not about visualizing something in your belly. This is about going to the direct experience somatically of that. What does it really feel like there? So you can use the inquiry, what does it feel like within the lower belly? How do I know I have a lower belly? And you can start to notice, what would it be like to fully enter into the experience of the torso and the lower belly, and try to get your awareness then from there. Once you have a general feeling of it, you try to just gently bring your awareness, without forcing it, to that crosshairs spot, and you just kind of feel in there. And what you'll notice after a while is that you'll know when you found it because you'll feel either warmth, or you'll feel like muscles might start to pull within there and move around a little bit. You might be like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. Like, I actually feel stuff moving around. If you try to be too forceful, what'll happen is you can actually create stagnations energetically, and that can be actually require an acupuncturist or a Chinese medicine practitioner to fix that. So I'd probably be very careful. If it feels like you're forcing it, just stop and find a teacher who can teach you this if you're just really struggling with it. But the more that you can just use that kind of gentle awareness, the better. And all you do is you just bring attention there, and that's it. And you just breathe normally, and you let your body do what it does normally, and without using too much effort or anything like that. You have to use enough effortless effort, I guess, to look, to be able to directly feel into that area to find it, right? But once you kind of find it, you just relax into it, and you just let it do that. And as it starts to tug and move around and get warm, that's the chi or the prana moving down to that spot. And the more you build that spot, the easier it is going to be for grounding. And the more that energy center is going to come online, which is good. And over time, that is actually going to help you to clear out karma out of your system, clear out the samskaras, anything that's hidden in the body will eventually begin to get transformed through this, because the dantian will start to fill up. The hara will start to fill up with chi or prana. And, eventually it will overflow. It will reach, after, probably a few years of practice with this, it will start to overflow, and it'll start to awaken other meridians, like the one up the spine, the one down the front. And that will create, in Taoist tradition, they call that the microcosmic orbit when that happens. I don't ever recommend consciously trying to loop energy with your mind, up the spine and down the front. I would not recommend doing that, because it's not really actually the way it's done in traditional Taoism, believe it or not. It's more, you fill the dantian until it overflows, and then when it overflows, it goes up. And up the spine and down the ren, front channel. Okay. And I think it does require you to set it in motion a little bit. That's another video. I'm not going to talk about that here. But the dantian is important, and the hara is important in this work. Meditation systems that don't include that, they do risk energetic burnout. They do risk, you risk blowing your circuits and getting too energetically overloaded, and that can be bad, because it can burn out your adrenals. It can start to threaten your endocrine system overall, and it can lead to insomnia. It can lead to all kinds of mental disorders and things like that. So it's best to have a practice that includes a somatic approach anyway through the body. And I'd say the hara training should be one of the core fundamental practices of that, just as a safeguard, if for no other reason, So those of you who've practiced Nigong or Qigong, you're going to know what I'm talking about, right? You're going to know what this dantian is, and part of it is you have to form the hara. It's not going to just, everybody holds the seed of potentiality in there, but it takes time for that to awaken energetically. And it takes, practice really to do that. But the stronger that it gets, the more magnetic power it has. So you can handle actually having a lot more Kundalini or Shakti in your system, and a lot more chi, a lot more prana, and that increases the vitality of your body, so that your awareness is that much more brighter, but not in a way that it's going to hurt your endocrine system or burn you out, or otherwise like overload you and overwhelm you. So I would keep that in mind, and I would use that as a fundamental energetic basic practice. You know, even Renzai Zen has this in it, and that's a very direct path that, you know, but they still acknowledge that the body goes through a transformation with awakening. Okay? Because it absolutely does. And this is just a safeguard to help you not get overwhelmed. Okay? So, if you like this video, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to just leave them down below. Thank you so much for joining me today.